All right, all right. MMA, the AllStar MMA Live show is back to recap UFC Las Vegas. I got two guests. Logan Logan. You're in the UK, right?
Yeah, London. Yeah,
Uh, London. Love it. Love the accent. You know what I mean? Always good to have a fresh accent on the show. And then
yeah.
Ant Walker, and you're in New York City, right? You're in New
No,
York.
I'm in LA.
You're in LA.
Yeah, I
Why the
live in
hell?
LA. I'm originally from DC, but I live in LA.
Okay.
Excuse me if you
Oh.
hear my kids like banging on the door. They're like wondering why I've locked myself in this room, but you heard why. So
Yeah. All right, all right. Oh, you're from DC. I used to live out in like the suburbs of DC. No, actually near Baltimore.
okay.
In Aberdeen Proving Grounds. I
Oh,
remember that.
Aberdeen, yeah,
Yeah,
been through
Aberdeen.
there quite a few
Yeah.
times. Oh my God, I'm so live on air. Why?
Yeah.
Let me mute my mic up.
It's all good, man. It's all good. Hey, anyways, everybody, make sure you guys go in the descriptions and download the AllStar app. You know what I mean? We have a show on Thursdays that we do for picks. Go and watch that show as well. And today we're here to react to all the ridiculousness from UFC Las Vegas. And at the end of the show, we'll bring up some newsworthy items and react to those as well. Let's hop right into it. The main event, Merab Dvalishvili, unanimous decisions, Petr Yan. It was a good fight, man. I thought it was a good fight. I thought it was a fight where there was a lot of moving pieces, a lot of like, I don't want to say action, but there was a lot of movement going on in the fight. And Merab clearly won that fight. You know what I mean? There was no argument, like there was no controversy behind it. I put out some tweets during the fight to just, rattle some cages, and it did rattle some cages. People were getting angry for no reason. You know what I mean? It's like, who is this guy? Who is this media member? Like, he should never judge a fight. I'm not a judge. I'm I'm barely a media member, so it's like it is what it is. I'm just putting out tweets. You know what I mean? You guys want to get angry about it, get angry about it. Anyways, 49 takedown attempts by Merab. I think people have to realize that people don't even make 49 attempts at anything in their life, and he did it in 25 minutes. And the crazy part is Petr Yan defended 38 of them. I think that's the crazy part. You know what I mean? More than 49 takedown attempts. Let's jump to you, Ant, first. You're just like overall thoughts on this fight.
Well, first, I want to address like the takedown attempts, the number of takedown attempts, because typically when I hear a lot of takedown attempts or just a lot of takedowns that someone scored, period, that means to me like typically you don't have good top control. A guy like Khabib, for instance, say for I think what was the domestic abuser that he beat up. Abel Trujillo, that guy.
Yeah.
So aside from a fight like that where he like just ragdolled him and threw him around, for the most part, like Khabib didn't have a whole lot of takedowns. He just had one or two like serious ones per round, and he just beat you up. Um, but this is a time where that stat means a lot less to me, because if you take it in totality, it was the entire game that Merab was putting together. It was the takedowns were being chained to one another, so you might have like four takedown attempts within one actual true school attempt, and on top of that, it's punches, it's kicks, it's this forward pressure. It was so much to it. It was just like this stew of offensive violence that he was putting forth, and the takedowns only are just a part of it. Overall, I think this was one of the best performances we've seen in a fight night main event in quite some time. I mean, this was on par with some of the all-time great pressure fight performances. This is like Robbie Lawler at his peak, just charging forward at somebody, just battering them. This was TJ Dillashaw at his juiced up finest, just dancing around the ring and just doing whatever he wants to somebody. This was spectacular what he did, and to do it against a former champion like Petr Yan, who in the very recent past held that belt, that means a whole lot.
Yeah, Yan is a pressure fighter as well, and he did it like he pressured the pressure fighter and dominated in pretty much every aspect. Right, early in the fight, he was even landing the calf kicks and made Yan switch stance and kept him at southpaw. I believe southpaw, yeah, southpaw for the rest of the fight, and I think that fucked him up as well. Petr Yan couldn't, switch stances and have that movement like he usually does. He likes to get in the flow, and this fight kind of went backwards because Petr Yan usually starts slow, but he kind of started fast in this one. It was a little bit more competitive in the early rounds compared to the later rounds. Beat up the eye. The hematoma was getting bad. Logan, what'd you think of the game planning of Merab and his gas tank? People were questioning his gas tank as well heading into this fight, but there was no problems.
Yeah, unbelievable gas tank. Like I've never seen someone push a pace like how he did. Like it was something you'd think he on the juice or something. Honestly, you'd think it. Like we've never seen Merab in a 5 rounder, if I'm not mistaken, and that was the question if he could keep it up, and he sped up in the 4th and 5th, and yeah, Yan had no opportunities to he downloads data, but he didn't have a chance.
Yeah, that there you go. Another aspect of this fight that people should probably look at is Yan is a guy that likes to download data in the early rounds, and he was never able to like download any data. He was just never able to like kick into gear. Merab was in there. You know, I don't know who exactly game plans and helps in game plan. It could be Aljo. Well, ahead of the fight, I was telling people that he helped Aljo 2 camps prepare for Petr Yan. 2 camps, and then they flipped the roles, and now Aljo was helping Merab for his camp against Petr Yan. Every camp, I'm pretty sure they're getting better and better at reading Petr Yan because Petr Yan hasn't changed any, right? It's not like he, and go ahead. I know you want to say.
Yeah, because you're really just pulling the thoughts out of my brain, because I'm reminded of like Team Alpha Male game planning for Dominic Cruz forever. And then finally, Cody Garbrandt was the one who was able to do it. And then I think back to like the first fight between Aljo and Petr Yan. Like Merab pretty much replicated the strategy that Aljo had in that first round, where he just went balls to the walls and just throwing strikes and trying takedowns and everything. But he did that for 5 rounds without gassing. He did that with 5 rounds with more power behind all of his shots. He did that with 5 rounds with better takedown attempts. It was like he did that same thing for a longer stretch of time and better than Aljo did it. That I mean, that's a thing of beauty right there. That's and to Logan's point, I mean, I'll say that there will probably be a lot of people that are going to be like, oh, he's got to be on EPO or something, but that level of gas tank. But that's I don't want to throw that accusation out there and just point the finger, because that will be irresponsible. But if I'm him, I'm taking that as a compliment, though, because his gas tank looked otherworldly. The human body is not supposed to be going through that. to be able to have that level of endurance, consistently putting out that much power, and then the mental aspects of it, your brain switching between all these disciplines and all this extra stimulus, and the pressure of performing at that high of a level. What he did was remarkable, and I don't think there's many other words to describe how wonderful it was.
Merab, he embraced the moment as well, right? It was his first main event, a 5-round fight against the former champ inside that theater, right? A crowd is there. He's hyped, man. Like walking out, he looked like he was ready to put on the performance of his life. When you compare Petr Yan, he looked very stoic. Well, he looks stoic all the time, right? He's a Russian fighter. But yeah, Merab, incredible, man. Logan, where does Yan go from here? I think that's the biggest question, right? We kind of understand what Merab is looking for in the future, but where does Yan? He's lost his last 3 out of 4, 3 out of 5, something like that.
4 out of 5.
4 out of 5. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, you have to question whether he's even in the UFC at this point, because I mean he's not going to get cut, but it's whether he wants to stay around, because the last 2 before this one, obviously they was. Well, the Aljo one, I thought he won. The O'Malley one, obviously, quite a few people thought he got robbed, so to say. But yeah, he's gonna have to take a step back. Someone outside the top 5, you'd think, just to get his confidence back. But outside the top 5 at bantamweight, it's a shark tank. Like everyone's good. So yeah.
Yeah, he's in a weird position, right? And just to, like we see this with a lot of fighters, especially a lot of former champs. They become a champ, and then they lose the title, and then they have to face the guys that are coming up, and then they lose back to back to back, and then now you're like, is, you know, people start, oh, he's washed. He's not washed, man. He's still Petr Yan, dude. He can beat like 95% of the bantamweights in the world. What do you do with him? Like, what are the matchups like that would help him get back to that top 10 or top 5?
I think you take the, like, say the loser of was it Marlon Vera, who he's fighting
Sandhagen
next. Like, you could run that, you could, if Sandhagen goes out, of course that'll be a rematch, but that was a pretty good fight if I'm remembering correctly. You could run that back, the loser of that fight. I do think too that the Yan is in it's an interesting time for him to be in this position, because looking at the way the UFC moves as a business right now, there are a lot of names that should be still there that have found their way out of the door because they were people who reached certain levels, get paid, more than someone making 10 and 10 off the Contender Series, and they simply could use a cheaper roster spot. So I wonder where Yan is in his contract right now, because you'd have to look at, okay, well, Aljo's got, I mean, granted, one of them was by DQ, but he's got, a serious decision win over him. He's got, and now Merab has beaten him, and you would think he would be in the title picture as well. It's starting to look like he doesn't have too many options as far as that belt. And for the UFC to game plan where they're going to spend their money on talent, a guy who probably isn't going to win the belt again becomes more expendable. Don't be surprised if his contract is, 1 or 2 fights down the line or whatever, and we're seeing him walk off to go somewhere else. There are a lot of fighters that can probably tell that same story.
When you're a former champ, you've kind of reached the level you wanted to reach in the UFC, right? Because a lot of guys, when they join the UFC, they want to become the champ and make the championship money. And then once you get a championship contract, that means your contracts are pretty fat, right? If you look at Cody Garbrandt, his checks are way fatter than, probably like 5, 6, 7 times fatter than Trevin Jones was, right? And he had to really win that fight, right? Because if you win, you get paid more. Petr Yan's contracts are definitely fat. It seemed like after the last fight, he didn't even want to be in the UFC anymore. And he was talking a lot of shit. And it almost seemed like they gave him this matchup just to be like, fuck you. You talk shit. We're going to give you a terrible stylistic matchup, and you're going to lose another one and lose, I guess, ruin your stocks, so to say. I think Petr Yan might even just go to the UFC and say like, hey, I have a fat check. You know what I mean? I'm expendable. Let me go. They did it to Darren Till. You know what I mean? Darren Till's checks are fat as hell. And he said, hey, I want to leave. Maybe they'll do that. I think the UFC is more inclined to do that now than ever, because they're like, hey, we got young talent coming up. We got these deals all around the world, TV deals all around the world, right? Making crazy money. It doesn't really matter who's in the main event, right? It's like they already been paid, right? They already been paid for all the work that they've done. I say Petr Yan might be in the UFC, but I would not be surprised if he walks away, if he separates from them and goes and fights for Bellator even. You know what I mean? Like Bellator will probably give him a fat check, and there's a lot of good matchups there. I don't think about PFL. I don't even think they have a bantamweight division. They don't. Even a Russian promotion, who knows, right? But I could see him going. Now, with Merab, him saying he doesn't want to fight Sterling, in my opinion, I think that's a bad idea. You know what I mean? I know that they're close, and I know that they're teammates, and I know all of that, but it's like, this is, at the end of the day, dude, like, this is the individual sport, right? Like, you have to make a separation in my eyes and kind of like go your separate ways if it gets to that. If the UFC comes to you and says, hey, the next fight for you is for the belt and you're going to fight Sterling, you and Sterling have to sit down and say like, yo, this is what we both want. This is our dream. Is your dream to let your friend be the champion for the rest of his life? Is that your dream? No, your dream is to be the champion, be the number one guy in the world. Logan, am I wrong for saying that? Do you agree that guys should not fight each other because they're friends and they made a secret pact, like it's, the sisters of the, I don't even know, it's like a kids movie or something.
Yeah, no, I think Merab's gonna have to. He's got to step up at one point if he wants to be a champion. He's holding up the division, which, in my opinion, is the best division in the UFC at the moment. It's got the most talent, and he's picking off contenders that Aljo don't have to fight him. I don't get the game plan other than helping Aljo. But what does that do for him? Like, it doesn't really make sense to me. And also Dana, obviously, he after the power slap last night, he got asked about it. He didn't seem best pleased about the approach. And I mean, it's only a matter of time. It was a favourable, although he was the underdog, it was a favourable matchup last night. But if he keeps stalling, he'll get Dana will just give him some tough matchups. I know he looks unbeatable, but they won't favour him too kindly with the matchups if he sticks to his guns and doesn't fight Aljo.
And what do you think about the situation?
I'm hesitant to comment on it, but so much simply because we don't know the degree of their relationship. We hear about friendships in the sport a lot, and and I know you've trained before I've trained, and you make friends with people you spar with and you roll with and all that, and that's totally understandable. But we also know the insane level of self-belief and visualization and all these things that go into becoming a champion. This could be very much like the Daniel Cormier and Cain Velasquez situation, where it's just two guys who happen to be really great at the same time, and they're also best friends. And that becomes more of a personal decision. Like, do you value the friendship, more than this goal to win this belt? And I understand either way. I can understand, because hopefully we all have a friend that we would at least hesitate, because of that loyalty. So maybe that friendship is to that level, but he's not doing himself any favors as far as his career, because granted, as a fighter, you have a very short shelf life, and there's no guarantee, especially in a division that's loaded with talent like bantamweight, that you can hold on to this spot for much longer. Just going to take a quick look at the current top 10 rankings, and Merab matches up well with a lot of guys, but it's not inconceivable that someone like Song Yadong could land one good shot and put him out. Like that's not from an alternative reality. That something like that could really happen. It's not crazy to think that Sean O'Malley would have a chance to beat him. That's not wild to visualize. These things can happen, and in mixed martial arts, which is such an unpredictable thing, they do happen. And there are plenty of guys who could have had their title shot and for one reason or another didn't take it, or just weren't able to capitalize, and they're no longer here and they're no longer in that conversation. It will be a shame if Merab is part of that conversation when it's all said and done.
Yeah, that would be a complete shame, and I'm pretty sure he will sit with a lot of regret as well. I mean, if and yeah, you open my mind to that aspect of it as well. It's like we don't know the degree of their relationship. We don't know how close that they are with each other. I mean, they could be, best of friends, right? They would kill it for each other, whatever you want to say. But yeah, man, if you were willing to kill for each other, that means you're willing to give each other the opportunity to try and accomplish your life goal, basically, is to become the UFC champion. And Sterling has already become that many times over. But if like you said, the extent of the friendship, maybe, and they're talking about it already, is like, yeah, Sterling defends the title one more time, he'll move up to featherweight and go up there because he's a big boy. The thing is, would the UFC want that? Would the UFC want Sterling to go up to featherweight? And would the UFC allow Sterling to fight for the title immediately if he goes up to featherweight? Do you think so, Ant?
Yeah, if he's holding the belt, then yes, I think so, because at the end of the day, it's a super fight to promote. So that's what they're going to put forward. I mean, I think it's no secret that they don't want Aljamain Sterling to be the champion. I don't think that's a secret at all. However, if he is still holding that belt and there's an opportunity to fight for the featherweight belt, oh man, that means we could put all the belts we want on that poster, and it could be the pound for pound #1 fight like every main event ever is. And that's what's going to happen, because at the end of the day, it's all about the almighty dollar. So that's going to sell, especially depending on who's holding that featherweight belt. If it's Volkanovski, still, then like, oh man, then you've got one dominant champ fighting another dominant champ. So let's go. I mean, that's a no-brainer. The UFC would definitely open the door for that.
There you go. So all Sterling needs to do is beat Cejudo, and
Oh yeah, easy
that
work. Yeah, that's
yeah,
nothing. Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
what's gonna happen. Like Sterling beats Cejudo, takes care of business, gets on the mic, calls out Volkanovski. Oh, Volkanovski's at the event. Put him into the ring like he did last time, right?
But you know, if you're Aljamain Sterling, like you're not making that call out after beating Cejudo. If you still got Sean O'Malley right there, like that's the money fight for him in that division. That's the fight that's really gonna add to his bank account. So I mean, it's got to be 2 fights. It's got to be Cejudo, and then it's got to be O'Malley, and then we're talking about featherweight for him. And if you're Merab, that's the best case scenario for this.
We could also get into a situation where maybe Sterling fights Yair, because we do have an interim champ at featherweight as well, right? You never know.
Right.
You never know what the UFC is gonna come with wheeling and dealing, and it seems like Sean O'Malley is starting to gain some power within the division, and maybe Sean O'Malley is gonna come out and say like, yeah, let's do interim title fight while while Sterling goes and fights Yair or whatever. You know what I mean? Who knows, man? But yeah, it seems like it doesn't matter how many titles are being held. The UFC is just like they need to put belts on the line, every event, and I can see that happening. What did you think, Logan, about the karate chop that Yan landed on Merab at the face-offs? Like, do they need to start penalizing fighters for like touching each other, man? Because we've seen what happened when with the Stevens situation, right? And Jakar Close. Like, what do you think of that?
I mean, if it was up to me, well, Dana talked about fines, about it, giving out fines, but it was the main event. He's not going to fine someone, or he's not going to take someone out of a fight if it's the main event, because then he's got no show. So it's just with Dana, it's different situations. He'll do different things when it suits what suits his business. So if it was say Davy Grant pushed a Sun Sao, I mean, he could pull the fight because it don't do much for him, but he was never taking the main event out. But fines, I'd probably go down that route.
When's the last time, Ed, that Dana White or the UFC fined a fighter?
Yeah, I don't. I'd be very surprised if they actually find anyone for that. They and really we've seen the UFC like reward this sort of behavior. Like keep in mind, like Dana, like you brought up Jeremy Stevens and Jakar Close. Remember, Jeremy Stevens was in jail, and Dana was trying his damnedest to get him out of jail for an assault charge so that he can fight the next day. We had Connor throwing the dolly at the bus and injuring fighters and actually throwing off the entire card. And they put that clip into the commercial for his next fight.
Yeah. It's promotion, isn't it?
Yeah, it's promotion. Like this is really something where the athletic commissions would have to step in, but at the same time, like they're getting a cut of everything too, so they're just gonna let it ride. It's one of those things where it's just unfortunate. I think if you are the fighter, though, be smarter. Like, don't be an idiot. If Yan like really hurt Merab with that karate chop, not only are you looking at some sort of legal ramifications, you're also like your payday is gone, dude. Like you did all this training, you put all this money into your camp, and now because you can't control your temper when you're about to fight this guy in 24 hours, now you're gonna blow it at this moment. That's bozo time. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like you have to think beyond that moment. And I get that fighters are emotional, and this is an emotional and jarring experience that they go through. But at the end of the day, this is prize fighting. Don't jeopardize the prize, for those emotions. Like that would really be what I say. Let the fighters need to just wise up. Like don't be stupid.
The UFC is not responsible for fining fighters. I don't think it's the commission. That's why the commission is there. They're to oversee all of that stuff, right? And so the UFC doesn't need to fine anybody. The commission should. But it just shows you another reason why the commission is crooked. Why the commission is a bunch of, like you said, bozos, right? They're a bunch of bozos. They're a bunch of clowns. They're just, they're just yes men basically to the UFC or whatever promotion that's coming to town, right? And they're gonna do what they need to do to make the money, because commissions are about money as well, right? I don't think fighters should be touching each other, because before the whole Jakar Close situation, I didn't really think nothing of it. But then Jakar Close had some serious injuries, man, from that push. And I was just like, man, damn, like you could get fucked up from like just being so relaxed and facing off with somebody and someone making like crazy contact. Even
Think about John Jones and Daniel Cormier. With that fight, which I know the official reason that was listed for that fight being delayed, their first fight, wasn't because of the press conference incident, but it's kind of hard for me not to think the press conference incident is going to lead to some level of injury when you got the dais falling over and bodies on top of each other and when shoes being thrown and whatnot. Like that sort of behavior has jeopardized fights in the past. So like knock it off, dude. Like get the money. The money is right there. All you got to do is control yourself, and then you get to bust this guy all upside his face if you can the next day. Just chill.
Yeah, you know, people getting a little antsy because of that whole situation. But Merab went in there and did his thing. It's over with. He's the next contender or one of the contenders for the title. Co-main event. Let's move on to that. I know I'm frozen. I don't know why I'm frozen, but I'm still here. Romanov. Man, I didn't realize how out of shape he looked until he actually stepped into the cage, because skill for skill, I thought Romanov was going to be able to go in there and do what he did, but he didn't. And he was extremely out of shape. He looked like he was overweight. He didn't look like what he looked like in his last fight and just got TKO'd in the first round. Pretty much tired himself out. But there was a fence grab, Logan. There was a fence grab, and there was nothing being done about it. And this is something that's become a pet peeve of mine, is fighters are grabbing the fence and referees are pretty much not doing much about it. And if they do, they're making a mistake around it. What do you think of that whole situation? Do you think the fight would have went any different if the fence grab didn't happen?
I mean, it's hard to say because Romanov, he looked so out of shape. He looked like he didn't want to be there. You could argue when it did end, he half quit, but I wouldn't accuse him of that, but you could argue it. But what I will say with Romanov, when we've seen him get the first takedown, it usually ends within 2 minutes on the ground. So, I mean, I'm sure Romanov will claim if there weren't the fence grab, he would have won the fight, but he didn't look like he wanted to be in there, and I don't know what the weight situation was about. I don't know. Need an explanation from him what went on, because that was a strange performance. And apart from the last fight, he gassed out in that, but you can blame the altitude because that was in Utah. So there's a reason for that. But first, it wasn't even the first round. It's 2 minutes in, and he was gassed.
It seems like, you know, that something was wrong, right, with him heading into the fight. I don't know. Maybe he was just eating too many donuts or something. I have no idea. But yeah, I was more disappointed in his performance rather than impressed by Volkov. Could that be said, Ant?
Absolutely. I think that's a fair way to look at it, because it's hard to not factor in the blatant fence grab and the blatant mismanagement of fitness on both sides. Like without those two factors, we're talking about a different fight, most likely. I do find it believable that Volkov grabbing that fence saved himself from losing that fight. Like I see a world where Romanov gets him down, chokes him out, beats him up, does whatever, and the fight's over with. And we've got this, we're talking about a whole different narrative. However, like, who's to say that Romanov comes in that type of shape? He gets Volkov down. Volkov puts up an iota of resistance, and Romanov wears himself out trying to maintain a positional advantage. Like that's a distinct possibility too. I think both fighters are clearly in the wrong here. But the biggest thing that's wrong to me in this is the lack of proper officiating for these fence grabs, because the officials can't stand over a fighter and smack the slice of pizza out of his hand, and they're not going to stand in there and force you to do extra miles on the bike or whatever. But they can stop a fighter from grabbing the fence, and if they grab the fence, they can penalize. That had a very obvious effect on what happened, and there was literally no action taken by any official. So that's the biggest black mark on this fight to me.
Yeah, and connected to that, the result is the result of that fight, right? But the fence grab, I think this is something that we need to talk about. The commissions need to talk about more in detail, and I don't understand why there's no refs on the outside watching the fights like in other promotions. Like back in the day in Pride, they had refs on the outside helping the ref on the inside, like see things that he wasn't able to see, yelling things to him, like guiding him, helping him, right? There's the referee is just by himself in there. It's like you need to have somebody on the outside with a different perspective, at least two, maybe one on each side, and telling him like there was a fence grab, stop the fight, like penalize this dude. Like we need more, not less. We need more, right? And like the fence grab is something that's blatant, man. Like you don't just grab a fence on accident, right? This just doesn't happen. Like if you're falling, you're gonna grab something, right? And it's on purpose. It's not like, I didn't know. No, like And now it's like fighters are just taking advantage of loopholes, right? They're finding loopholes everywhere. It's not even just in fence grabs, it's everything else. And let's talk about the Davy Grant fight. Same thing. Davy Grant's losing that fight, like clearly losing the fight. Assunção's winning that fight, and what? There's a minute left, and Assunção's going for a takedown, and Davy Grant grabs the fence, and then he's penalized for it. But then they're restarted in the center, which is more advantageous to Davy Grant. And I don't understand like why that happened, right? And from what I heard is that the takedown wasn't complete, so that they would just start it back in the center. It's like, damn, that's a funny situation right there, Ant, right? Like,
yeah,
he's
that's
in the motion.
an odd one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not too mad about that one because that wasn't a complete takedown, and yeah, but still, like it was a fence grab. Like I maybe just across the board, fence grabs should be penalized with a positional change. Maybe that's the answer, and because I understand a hesitance in taking points away when you got a 3-round fight to score and how that can really sway things. So maybe the answer is if there is a fence grab, okay, you automatically now you start on your back. And whether the takedown is complete, whether the grab was instinctual, whatever the case may be, you are going to be put on your back, and you've got to figure it out from there. Because something has to give. Like the fence grabs will stop happening if something happens to you when you grab the fence. But I can't blame the fighters in this. Officiating has clearly laid out the path for everyone who's competing in mixed martial arts. You probably get 2 freebies. You can kick someone in the groin once. You get away with an eye poke. You might get away with grabbing someone's glove, and you might have 2 times before it becomes a real deal. And some of those refs that say, okay, now they're really penalizing. It's just a stern warning. It goes from hey, don't do that to hey, I really mean it. Don't do that this time. And that's some of the biggest penalties that a fighter is seeing for fouls. So make the penalties consistent, make them across the board. Just do it every time. If you commit a foul, be penalized. That will help the problem a lot.
I like that idea, Ant, of not penalizing for the fence grab, but penalizing, not taking away points, but penalizing with the positional change. Like, let's say you do, I'm fighting Ant and I'm taking Ant down. Ant grabs the fence. You stop the fight, and you warn the fighter, but then you put that fighter, like you put Ant on his butt against the fence, and then now I'm in a takedown position, and now we're on the ground. I think that would be a great solution, to be honest with you. And then you don't even have to take a point away. You know what I mean? And most fighters, they don't want to be in that position. They don't want to be stuck on the fence. You know what I mean? With the guy on top of them, right? It's just
right.
It's and like it's almost refs, like halfway, right? It's almost like halfway.
Because most refs don't want to want to influence the actual arithmetic that goes into who won the fight. I think that's a fair thing for a ref to feel hesitant about that. But something has to be done. Rules have to be enforced in some way, and that's probably the best way to do it because the fighter who would benefit from the point change, well, they don't get the point change, but they get exactly what they were trying to get in the first place, and that's the other guy on his back.
That's a great solution, man. I never even thought of it like that. Logan, what do you think? Do you have another solution? Like, the point taken away would always be something that's easy to say, right? Just take a point. But do you see a solution for even like eye poke attempts? You know what I mean? Because we saw in the main event, Herb Dean warned like Petr Yan 4 times about his fingers, right? He never actually poked him in the eye, but he warned him a bunch of times.
Yeah, I'd agree with Ant. It's you're better off putting them on their back rather than taking points, because what officiating issues always come down to is the consistency. Because you got Davy Grant grabs the cage once, he gets a point taken instantly when it wasn't even a full takedown, and then you've got Volkov, who was milliseconds away from being on his back, and it's won him the fight by not being taken down, and he's not taking a point. So position is probably better than points if we're gonna change something.
But you throw that to the side. What a hell of a performance by David Grant, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this dude is like, that's the furthest you could be against the wall, right? Like, you're losing every round. You're losing the final round. They take a point from you. And dude pulls off reverse triangle off a takedown. It's insane, man. Like, this guy, like, I love watching David Grant fight. Logan, you know what I mean? You're the UK guy. David Grant, you know what I mean? Like, the dude is phenomenal, right? Like, he's entertaining.
Yeah. We love him over here. Most people would want him fighting this weekend. I know he said he don't mind fighting in Vegas because obviously he was training there anyway. But yeah, he's probably one of the funner British fighters in the entire roster. So, and yeah, proved it once again. 2 round 3 finishes in a row now. So looking good. Big fight next for him, most likely. He's got that win over Martinez as well, hasn't he? Who just beat Nurmagomedov, so that's a big win now.
Yeah, he's a dark horse. I think that's what you could call him, like a dark horse.
Obviously, age is against him as well, but
yeah,
dark horse.
That's the thing. There's some guys out there that just can continue fighting, and the older they get, they just get better, or they just they find their prime late in their career, and we've seen that in a couple of guys. And there's a couple comments. Let's get to some of these comments. Jorge A. Does it really matter if the fight would have ended the same way or not? He committed a foul and should be penalized for it. That's a fair. And Roid Rage, I love the name. You cannot put fighters in a position that they have not been in. Take a point every infraction, and the fouls will slowly stop. That's fair too. But it's just, like you said, you don't want the ref to get into the arithmetic of the fight, right? And I think that's a good counterpoint to that. But also, if you're on your way down, it's almost like you're already in that position, right? Because that's why you're grabbing the fence, because you're going down. You're going to be on your butt. You're going to be on your back. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's just closer than others, right? But yeah, the fence grabs, we need to really hone in on that, and the commissions really need to. Well, we talked about what the commissions do; they don't do shit, right? So the 12-6 elbows, that's still a illegal. What is it? A legal move, right? It's just it's so stupid. And I still think that these to a grounded opponent should be legal. I don't know why it's not legal. You know what I mean? There's promotions that have it, and there have been no problems. What is it? Pound for pound TV. I agree, guys. Put the fighters on their asses. Yeah, man. I think that's a great solution. Hopefully somebody is listening to us that has some power. I doubt it, but you know what it is. Now, before we move on, make sure you guys go into the descriptions, download the AllStar app, make your picks for fights every weekend. We're making picks. And I picked David Grant to win by knockout in the 3rd round on the app, but he won by submission. Because I knew that David Grant, he likes to get into these wacky fights and then end up winning by some wacky way at the end of the fight. And I didn't see a submission coming, man, but props to him. Let's go to Krylov and Ryan Spann, man. That was a wild fight, right? They were just all over the place. And my gripe is, why did Ryan Spann follow Krylov into his guard? I would have thought in that transition, he would have just stood up and kind of walked away and made some separation, right? But he wanted to roll with Krylov, right? Which was a huge mistake because he got triangled. And what did you think of that fight, man? A lot of people expected Spann to go in there and knock his head off, right? Because Krylov, sometimes he likes to brawl.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought would happen too. It just seemed like Span had that bit of success on the floor initially. Probably surprised him too that he was able to get, lock in Darce or Anaconda. Always confuse those. That he was able to lock in a choke and get some degree of success in it, and Krylov pop out, and then it's like, okay, I can do that again. That's probably, I would guess that's what got him to continue in that ground exchange. It was very, very exciting and very surprising too that Span was able to match him for the most part until he wasn't. I I would say, yeah, if you have a clear advantage over someone, as Span would likely have if they just stood on the feet the whole time, yeah, lean toward that. Lean toward that because it's unnecessary risk, and Span now is holding an L for that.
Man, what'd you think of that fight, man? It was a wild one, right? Just I enjoyed it. You know, what I mean, those are sometimes those are the fights where I'm just like, yeah, these dudes went at it, man, and you can't like criticize the other guy. It's just like, just let them, like, they went in there and fought their hearts out, man, and someone got finished. Logan, what'd you think of Krylov's performance?
Yeah, Krylov. I mean, 3 wins on the bounce now, so it's looking good. But they're all first round finishes, and that is, mm, he hasn't. Well, he kind of got gifted that win. Obviously, he got the sub. He latched up the sub. Fair enough. But Span walked into it, and I think Span just addicted to violence by the looks of it. He just wants to be as close to his opponent as possible, and ultimately it was his downfall last night. But it can also win him the fight. So it's with these light heavyweights, it can end at any moment. So yeah, it's just for Krylov, it's a good win. But yeah.
Spawn is like a mysterious character too, right, Ant? Like when you see him like do interviews, he doesn't really say much. You don't really see him like train. Like there's not much on social media about him, right? It's like he's
Yeah,
a mystery.
it's like you almost forget about him until he fights. And then when he fights, he's like, oh, this guy's great. Like it's like this wonderful surprise whenever he just pops up on a card. And I just felt, I had the feeling like that as much as fun as Span was probably having in those ground exchanges, it's like you could tell Krylov was just a more seasoned grappler. Like he was just thinking a move or two ahead of Span. And it was just a matter of experience, if you ask me. Like he just had the solution in the moment that Span didn't have, and like he just had those initial moments of success and tried to capitalize on that, and we saw where that led. So I'm sure though that Span is going to be a factor in this division going forward. Like his upside is just too crazy for him to just kind of go away on this one.
Saeed versus Martinez, man. What a fight. Those guys, super high skills, man. Like their experience came out in that fight. Super close fight. I saw some people argue that Saeed won that fight. I thought either way it could have went. Martinez, man, he's just having a resurgence. I don't know if it's called a resurgence. Logan, would you call it a resurgence? Because now he's like a top 15 fighter, man. Dude is just
Yeah, I
getting
don't
better.
know. I always saw him as a top 15 fighter, but yeah, I don't know if I'd call it a resurgence because he's always fought to a high level. But yeah, it's a massive win. I didn't expect him to beat Nurmagomedov, but yeah, he got. You can't call it a robbery. There's no chance. It was a close fight, and yeah, I'm fine with it going his way.
I have this theory that a lot of these camps are starting to figure out the judging more and more and more every single event, and they're starting to realize like, okay, we have a game plan, and if this game plan isn't working, now you go to game plan B, which is to win the fight on the judges scorecards and to win rounds. And I think that's what Jonathan Martinez did in that fight. I mean, standing up, Jonathan Martinez is phenomenal, right? Like he has the kicks to the body, the kicks to the calf, the inner thigh, because he's a southpaw, and he did really well against Saeed. But I thought Saeed was winning like the early parts of those rounds, but then Jonathan Martinez made the switch to go to like, okay, I need to win the round because I lost the first half of it, and he did it in the clinch. If you notice in the clinch, and he did a very good job defending the grappling that Saeed tried to attempt on him. And what did you think of that? What do you think of my theory of like these coaches and these coaching staffs and these teams kind of figuring out the judging of like certain judges? Because I think you could find out like which judges are going to judge your fight.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with a lot of that. It only makes sense that the fighters and the coaches, they start developing a way to kind of cut through the noise in the system. That, they spend hours upon hours just looking at tape and analyzing just someone's slight dip in their elbow when they're retracting their jab. All these little details, they're going to notice what things judges tend to favor. They're going to see that and see trends that they can actually implement changes in preparation for. And I think what Martinez did was like a pretty smart move, and it's a classic move too. If you are losing the fight, as in the exercise of dishing out brutality on your opponent, well then turn it into a sport, turn it into a game,
Contest,
turn into a contest and manipulate the pace. So, those wild kicking exchanges that they were going on, you can't have those in the clinch. So you slow things up in the clinch. You might even have a better feel of when he's trying to take you down, and also all sorts of things happen when you start manipulating the pace. So it only makes sense that this is where coaches and fighters are headed toward, and that's a system that has screwed many of them over with inconsistent judging and inconsistent scoring and whatnot. So if you see some line of consistency, lean into it. If you don't think you can win the actual brutality of the fight,
yeah, it's evolving, man. It's evolving. The UFC is evolving, and at the end of the day, when a fight goes to decision, nobody remembers how the fight went. They just remember that it went to a decision and you won that fucking fight. Like you won it. You won it by unanimous decision. Nobody remembers. It goes like the performance goes off into the ether, right? Unless it was like complete dominance, like let's say the Merab fight, right? Then it's a different situation. But when it's a close fight, people just forget, and then they're just like, oh, you won the fight and you beat this guy who was a top 15 guy and you were right on the outside. They put you on a pedestal for that performance, right? And they forget about the little details. And coaching staffs, they're starting to figure it out, man. I'm telling you. You know who started this? James Krause. I'm telling you, James Krause was the one. I think he was one of the first ones that started to understand like the judging more and kind of had guys go in there with certain game plans to win fights. And I know a lot of the fights that he's coached, the guys finished fights, but there's certain fights where they did go to the judges. And he's also been screwed by the judges. I think he was screwed by, what was it? The Trevor Giles fight.
Yeah.
The Trevor Giles fight, right? Like that fight was, everybody thought that Krause won that fight and then Giles won, right? Like, I think, Krause, of course, he's in this whole situation with the feds and everything, but the guy is a mind, and like he was a phenomenal coach. So maybe him and Mark Montoya, I think he trained at Factory X as well, or they have some kind of connection. And Mark Montoya is a phenomenal coach too. You know what I mean? So like coaches are starting to figure it out, man. And they're like, we can't fix it. We can't like have the commission change anything. So now we just got to alter ourselves to the judging, to the judges, to the commission, and see what we can do to advance the careers of our fighters. And that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see a lot of that. Now let's go to the prelims. What stood out for you in the prelims, Logan? Like we had Josh Frem, man, underdog coming in on short notice, getting the guillotine choke in the second round. You had Victor Henry with the close fight with Tony Gravely, which was phenomenal. Lipsky, she went in there against Aldrich and got the UD. Bruno Silva with the front kick to the face and the choke. And then Carlton Harris with the unanimous decision. Who were you impressed by the most?
Impressed by the most, Bruno Silva, 100%. I was already high on him and I thought he was going to win, but some of the striking, everything, all aspects of the sport he was showing, he looked high level, and yeah, he's going to be a problem for, considering he's at flyweight, which ain't the deepest division at all. There's a clear route to the top of that, and yeah, I could see him beating some top guys, to be honest.
Yeah, he's a beast, man. He's
young as well.
Yeah, and he's down there at Fight Ready, right? Which is a phenomenal camp. And what about you? Who looked really good for you?
I mean, there were definitely some performances. No, Bruno Silva stands out just for what he did in the cage. I think Ariane Lipsky had a good performance as well. But Josh Friend, if I'm pronouncing that right, I'm sure I'm messing that up.
Yeah.
I don't pronounce names. Oh, I did. I got that right. Nice.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
right. So.
That's a very rare thing for me to pronounce the name correctly. But I got to give him a shout out for beating a domestic abuser. That always warms my heart. In Dumas, a dude who, with the things that he has hanging over his head right now, probably should not have a UFC contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see, karmic justice at the very least.
That bothers me too as well, is because Dumas, right? He has his past, right? And I'm a guy that thinks, my train of thought is like, you have your past, you know what I mean, and you could redeem yourself eventually, right? You could turn things around with your life and change yourself. But like the UFC allowing him to make his UFC debut, knowing that he has this past, it bothers me, because there's been fighters in the past where they've already fought in the UFC and they had something happen. They had something happen similar in their past, but it was way in the past, right? And they kind of like have changed themselves and rehabilitated themselves, and they cut them like right away. Like they just sliced them right away. They didn't even give them a chance to like even fight, right? It's just like, you're gone, right? And it's just, man, it's just weird, like why he was allowed to continue. Like, why was he allowed to like make his debut? Like, what was the reasoning when you've had different reactions to other fighters, right? I don't understand.
And this is a guy who, I know he was highly regarded in the regional scene. I think he came in undefeated for his UFC debut, but this is a guy who the roster doesn't really need. You didn't need to have this fight. Like, even if we go back to like Greg Hardy's stint in the UFC, as regrettable as of a decision as that was, and as ridiculous as it was that he was in the UFC, he was Greg Hardy. He was like one of the best pro athletes on earth, and the standout performer in the NFL, who was at the very least going to draw eyeballs, therefore draw dollar signs to the promotion. So in a business sense, okay, you can make this morally flawed argument that was justified. But to have a guy debut in the UFC, I mean, this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is the same guy that was like trying to charge $100 to interview him or something.
Yeah.
Like this is silly. You don't need this guy on your prelim card. It's just not necessary. And I did see like some pressure on social media about this. Like one of his I don't know if it was like his ex-girlfriend or some girl that he apparently hit at a bar or something like that. Like her father, went on some social media campaign, like trying to get attention to this. Like, from a PR standpoint, do you need this headache? Especially when you're, when the head guy, at least the figurehead of the promotion, is just coming off the heels of his own domestic abuse situation. It just doesn't sound smart to me. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Well, maybe he's gonna get a new deal with Power Slap League, and I think that's a good segue into MMA news reactions for this reaction show. So we got a couple of topics. I'm gonna put the first one on the screen, and it has to do with Power Slap League. I'm gonna put it out there. Let me put it up here, and we're gonna talk about this. Let's see. What is going on? Why am I not able to see this? Entire screen? Nah. Wait a minute.
So while we're who of this panel watched the Power Slap finale?
Never
Nobody.
watched it in my life, aside from clips that get forced in front of us.
Yeah, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Just no.
All right, so here, I don't know why it's doing that, but here we go. Okay, so Dana White. So MMAnews.com. I like these guys. They always have the news. All publicity is good publicity for Power Slap League. Announces season 2 in Fight Island, right? So I guess he went on the Pat McAfee show. I don't watch that show, but I guess he went on there. He's one of the like Dana White's guys, like Robbie from Barstool. And he says right here, I am working on a deal right now to film season 2 in Fight Island in Abu Dhabi. there you go. Ant, let's start with you. What do you think about this situation?
It's the same thing that I thought. I mean, that we knew. Like, it wasn't just my thoughts. This was the reality. Fight Island became a thing because the UFC was trying to run away from regulation. They were trying to regulate things themselves without the pesky interference of the United States government. You know, after they got booted out of the proposed Tachi Palace fight during the height of the pandemic, well, Fight Island became a thing. Now we're starting to see I believe it was a Nevada commissioner that said something about how, like, regretting that they sanctioned this. If I'm not mistaken, Florida is debating, or I mean, if Florida isn't all for it, then you've gone off the pasture. If like Florida apparently is debating about whether or not to sanction this. So if they're getting pressure from sanctioning bodies in the US, well, we already got our own setup overseas, so they'll just take it to Fight Island. Like that's what that sounds like to me. This is an effort to avoid regulation, and a lot of the scrutiny that they're getting, deservedly so, is going to put pressure on the sanctioning bodies. Therefore, let's get away from everyone.
Logan, what do you think of this move to Fight Island? Are you gonna fly to Fight Island? You're closer than either of us, so are you gonna go to Fight Island so you could be front row at some of these slaps?
Maybe if Dana pays me enough, everything's got a price, I suppose. But I don't see the skill in it. There's no appeal to me. Like with MMA, there's different techniques, there's kicks, there's punches, and there's different variations of stuff. But there's only one way you can slap someone around the face, and I've seen it a million times. Like where is the appeal? And yeah, the Abu Dhabi thing is, as Ant said, it's a regulation thing. It's because America, I can't see it going down well. It can't be selling that well.
You know, I'm sorry to step on your toes, fellas. Another thought that pops up in my head, like the audience in that portion of the world seems to be very wise about MMA. Like they like a high quality product. Like, say what you want about like the people running like a promotion like ACA or whatever, but it's quality fights that come from that regional scene, and a lot of very, very high level fighters, a lot of smart minds that come from that region of the world, like the Abu Dhabi grappling tournaments and whatnot. Like there are some very impressive things that have happened in that section of the world related to mixed martial arts. I can't imagine that there is a big demand for the audience over there to watch Power Slap. I just can't visualize a world where the same people who are going to, you know, gravitate to ADCC tournaments and that will pack Yaz Island to see, you know, what Anderson Silva and, you know, and BJ Penn and these star-studded cards that the UFC is putting on, and this high quality of product to go see Power Slap. It just enough to mandate like a whole island, a world devoted to power slapping. It sounds absolutely nuts to me. At this point, this feels like a vanity project that Dana is pushing too far, because this can't be profitable in the least. I know they're paying the talent, like, you know, the show money is like a double whopper, and the win bonus, you get the fries and the large Coke too. But even with that, especially if you're going to move everything to Yaz Island, even if the Abu Dhabi, like the government in Dubai or something is going to like fund something, this can't be profitable. It can't be. Like, what are you doing? This is an ego trip gone awry. Just let it die.
It's like a Black Mirror episode, this whole situation, right? It's Dana White, you know what I mean?
Fucking the pig.
Yeah, it's very, very odd, man. Like in his whole like campaign against the media as well. Like the media is the one to blame for killing it, you know, and you know, Dana White, he's a promoter, man. He's gonna promote the hell out of whatever he wants to promote. And he's gonna make lies up, because that's what promoters do. You know what I mean? If you follow the sport, you know that promoting is about fabricating a lot of things, right? Fluffing, so to say. And this whole like TikTok and 8 billion views and all that stuff. And now they ended with the worst ratings ever. It's because it's not a good product. That's why people don't want to see it. I mean, of course there's an audience for it, right? Because slapping has been around for years now. It's been on YouTube. I mean, it's been around. Like, you've probably seen it from time to time on social media, pop up on some kind of clip or something like that. But the problem is that the UFC is tied in with it, and I think that's the problem. I think that's what people are tripping about, and they're using the UFC's platform to push it as well, right? Like, you see it on commercials, and you seeing guys just get lit a fuck up, dude. Like, it's like that's all I've seen about Power Slap League. All I've seen is the highlights, and the highlights are just people just taking shots and just, I don't even know. It's almost like World Star Hip Hop. Like, it's like someone should be in the crowd yelling out World Star. Like, that's what I feel like it's like it's something that's off the street, dude. And how do you even train for that? Like, I don't understand. Like, what are you asking people about?
You
Dude,
don't. Did you
I'm
see
sorry,
that press conference with the press conference before the finale? I don't know what the woman's called, but she was presenting it, and she says, "Oh, the fascinating thing about this athlete," she calls him, "is that he doesn't even train. Like, how crazy is that? Like, why would you say you're trying to sell it, and you're trying to sell it as a sport, and you've just outed it as something you don't need to train for? Just doesn't. It's just a car crash is the word, probably."
This is the thing that drives me wild about Power Slap. Beyond I'll say the existence of it as far as the athletes are concerned. So the whole business thing and all that, we can run over that too. I have no problem just running all over that. But as far as the guys who are actually doing it, you look at mixed martial arts, you look at boxing, kickboxing, pretty much anything, any sort of combative discipline. There are normal, legitimate ways to find out that you have a talent for it, right? Like, women's MMA isn't that far from the days where like Betch Kohea, for instance, was she was in like a cardio kickboxing class. Somehow another stood out among everyone else, and she gets invited to team practices for the actual fight team, and like, oh, she's actually good enough to get into the UFC, and oh, she's good enough to earn a title shot and whatnot. Like that, we're not that far removed from that in women's mixed martial arts. But like, where's that avenue for Power Slap? Like, how many people have, they were a little out of shape, or they just wanted a challenge for themselves, or they were getting bullied or something, and they walked into a boxing gym, and all of a sudden, oh man, I actually can box. Like, I've got a strong right hand. Like, you find normal, legitimate ways to realize that you might be good at something. How does that happen with Power Slap?
You go to the bar. The bar.
The only way you realize that you're good at slapping somebody and getting slapped is either a traumatic childhood or you're an idiot at a bar. Those are the only two avenues. Like, nothing good, will inspire someone to say, "Oh man, I'm really good at slapping people and getting slapped. I can do that for a living." And even like the whole social media thing, like Dana's explanation of this being like a social media thing, I understand that makes sense to me. I get that someone just looking at numbers can see this video, which we've seen those for years, that just some clip that goes viral with someone getting slapped beyond their wildest dreams, and they get knocked out. We've all seen those, and they'll have 10, 15 million views or whatever. I can understand some number pusher looking at that like, oh, we've got something here. But what they're not factoring in is the reason why those things get so many views is because people just have their phone and they're just scrolling down the timeline, and they stop when they see something silly or stupid or remotely engaging, and they'll look at it, and then they move on to the next thing, and then they move on to the next thing, and then maybe another slap clip comes up. That doesn't mean that you can make a television show out of it. That doesn't mean that you can sustain like a league or a sport or anything out of it. The existence of it in and of itself is stupid, but it doesn't bother me that much, right? There are a lot of dumb ways to make money. There are a lot of dumb things and products to sell, and people will buy them. So be it. But the problem is when the UFC is putting on, granted, we got a nice fight night card yesterday, but we've gotten some really gutter trash product for quite some time, like really since this ESPN deal, and they're putting out 20 million events a year. Like they're digging to the bottom of the barrel to find the right talent and just filling these cards with anything they can. So when you have that, when you see the little bit of effort that goes into putting forth a quality product now in mixed martial arts, but the UFC is so hell bent on promoting power slapping, like to where that's getting prominent placement over like actual fights on their website, and the social media for the UFC is all driven toward power slap. When you've got like actual UFC fighters that are competing, it's really it's a slap in the face, no pun intended, of the actual athletes and not the guys who came up off a bar stool and said, "Oh, I'm gonna hit someone," without training. Like that's, I find that the existence of that within the UFC's realm to be really troubling and a bad sign for what they view their bread and butter, their real product that brought the fight nerds like us out today.
Yeah, that bothers me as well, is that they're pushing it ahead of the actual fighters, the actual competitors, the actual guys that go out there and go through like 8, 10, 12-week camps to perform at the highest level. They're like studying multiple mixed martial arts, perfecting martial arts, drilling, getting injured, throughout the process, and still stepping into the cage and competing. And they got these guys that, just like you said, stepped off, a taco truck, and someone called them a fat ass, and now they're slapping each other. Like that, they could start doing like venues like that, right? Let's be like, all right, we're gonna go to the food truck, popular food truck area in Austin, and we're gonna find the local guy, like that. And I'm wondering, like, okay, how are you selecting these guys as well? Like, who's the matchmaker? Who's the talent scout? Like, how do you even know, like,
Talent.
yeah, like, who's a slap scout? Like, I'm just thinking, like, why are there no, like, if this was actually something that you want to develop, why are there no like Samoans? Why are there no Tongans? Like, where are these are the guys that you want out there slapping each other, right?
Oh
Like,
man,
imagine that, right?
big thick hands. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness gracious, what knock your brain out.
Yeah.
That's a bad day. Some of them dudes getting into sport, man. It's sport. Here I am falling into the propaganda. It's, I mean, it's all a clown show. I think this is an interesting moment though for true combat sports aficionados to kind of. This is a moment for self-reflection for us, because at the end of the day, we are involved in something that is a ludicrous proposition. It's totally nuts. Like that we spend a disproportionate amount of time, money, and resources to watch people like strip to their underwear and just beat the crap out of each other. Granted, it's an art form and they're different components, and it's not just that simple, but it's still kind of a silly proposition. This turns it into a full-on clown show. Like,
Yeah.
this is a full-on clown show.
And
another thing I will say about this power slap thing, well, I think the Apex, because before the pandemic, Dana had to sell. This is for the UFC I'm talking about. Dana had to sell arenas every week with a good card and to sell it out. Now he's got the Apex. It's like a safety blanket where he knows he can get a certain number of views with just a bad average card. And he's now got Hunter, Mick, and Sean, who's just doing a lot of what he used to do 5 years ago, doing that job for him. And he's found himself with a lot of spare cash because he doesn't have to pay for the Apex, and everyone's pays so low, and a lot of spare time. And he's thought, well, I've got spare time, spare cash, I might as well use it. And then he's come up with this, which is pretty terrible product.
Because Zuffa boxing failed. Like this, that's at least in my opinion, that he put the effort into trying to form Zuffa boxing and getting that off the ground, and realize, oh man, we actually have, like, the boxers have like legal protections, and any established boxer is going to be used to making this percentage of the gate or this percentage of pay-per-view sales and whatnot. So yeah, that, as he used to say, that business model is broken, meaning we can't exploit people to pay them 16% of revenue. Like that's what it is. So slap fighting though, hey, you can pay guys. What was the payout that Eric Spicely said he was offered, like 2,000 a
Two
show,
for
2,000
two.
a win?
Yeah.
You know, you can do that and stretch out this money even further. And if I'm not mistaken, please, someone in the comments correct me if I'm wrong, or gentlemen, if you know the answer, please correct me if I'm wrong. But doesn't Dana get like a bonus if like the UFC spends under their budget?
What? I never even
I
heard
I
that.
I've
thought
never heard of it, but
I thought
wouldn't
I've heard
surprise me.
I thought I heard that there's some sort of incentive for him to run the promotion under budget.
Would
And
make a lot of sense, to be honest.
if
With
that's
the
the
Apex.
case, yeah, then I mean the Apex Center, the timing of it was perfect, just because, you know, the world pretty much ended for a little bit there, and that was a, you know, a good way to keep fights going and keep the entertainment rolling out. But now it's like this is sort of depriving, you know, the same audience of quality product if that's the level of care they put into it. I don't think it's a mistake that Yan and Dvalishvili were put on the main event of this card that is not at the Apex Center. Granted, we know Power Slap, you know, pushed them out the building or whatever the case may be, but you couldn't just go there with some of the trash main events that we've had in these fight nights. You couldn't go there and expect, you know, a couple thousand people to buy tickets realistically. So they understand what they're doing. They're fully aware of what they're doing, and that ESPN deal, I think, is up next year, if I'm not mistaken.
Soon, yeah.
I just wonder if ESPN is looking at looking at some of the numbers that they're getting from these events that they're paying, what was the estimated payout per event, like 10 million or something like that.
Damn.
If it
For Apex shows.
Yeah, it's like, is it worth it to them
Yeah.
at this point?
Yeah.
You just have to wonder what those balance sheets look like. I mean, they could be blowing the money out of the water in ESPN, possibly. I wouldn't know, but if the quality of product is going to continue to be bottom of the barrel, especially while we see the effort that they actually put into Power Slap, at some point there's going to be a backlash from the audience, if not the main source of income from the promotion, which is ESPN.
My thoughts on that is that the UFC, they're just going to do what they did to Fox with ESPN. They're just going to exhaust what they can exhaust and use them for what they can use them, and then they're going to move on, because there's so many other paid platforms that they could go to, like Amazon Prime. I'm guaranteeing you they're drooling over the UFC, right? They're kind of like testing the waters with one championship.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that deal is done, they're like, okay, we got the juggernaut on the way. Let's get a deal with them and lock them down for 10 years. Imagine a 10-year deal with the UFC. Like, I think Amazon Prime would love that, right? Netflix, I'm pretty sure Netflix is probably looking at adding sports to their platform. You know what I mean? There's Disney, like Disney, take it off ESPN, put it on the Disney platform. Who knows, man? It doesn't seem like Disney really cares about being it. From what I remember, Disney put anything on their channels, right? It's just we think of Disney as this children's platform, right? But it's not.
Disney
right?
put out Pulp Fiction, so Disney will show its ass from time to time. Like, I mean, even Fight Pass exists. Like, if they want to keep all the money in house, but at the same time, the problem though is that this isn't the UFC, as in, you know, Dana working alongside his high school buddies, the Fertitta brothers. No. This is the UFC, a part of this huge multimedia conglomerate that is in serious debt, and it's got all these loans and interest payments and whatnot. So they have to have this cash cow, which is the UFC. So, you know, that eliminates a lot of potential leeway that they have as far as where this money's coming from. So I'm just, at some point, I'm just concerned whether or not, maybe concern is the wrong word. I'm just curious as to whether or not this is going to continue being worth it for ESPN when most of these are just fight night cards, or unless the pay-per-views are just making so much money that they don't care about anything else. I wouldn't know, because I don't get to see those balance sheets. Just food for thought.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go on. Oh, go on. The pay-per-views, I was going to say, the pay-per-views, they can't be selling well because they've put the price up. And I know we don't get to see the figures for how many pay-per-views get sold each card, but there's a reason we don't see them as well because they're probably so low. But from the leaked ones, I remember last year, what was it? UFC 270 in Garn, heavyweight championship of the world, probably the biggest prize in the company, the heavyweight title. And I remember the leaked number was something like 250k, and ESPN pay for 400k's worth each pay-per-view. So they're not reaching them targets at all. And McGregor's been out, so he hasn't made up the numbers.
Yeah,
So
they're
they
starving for
can't
McGregor.
be happy.
They're starving for McGregor to come back, dude.
That's
They're
why he's
doing
on tough.
anything. Yeah, they're starving because they know that he's gonna be able to draw in. And ESPN, they loving it too, man. They're loving it that they're actually doing a tough, which yeah, a lot of people are gonna watch, man. Casual fans are gonna watch tough because McGregor's on there. They know McGregor. He's the biggest figure in the sport, right? If you love him or hate him, he's the biggest. He's the one that people are gonna watch. He's gonna draw the eyes, and his fight's gonna draw the eyes as well. Let's move on to the last topic of the show. Let's get this on the screen and we'll see what it is. All right. So what is this? Oh, I can't get it on the screen for some reason. I don't know why. Anyways, the topic is about this. It's been like a month or two, but I wanted to revisit this because I feel like it just flew under the radar. Is this altercation between Kevin Holland and Joseph Holmes, ugly man Joe, right? So I guess they've had like a beef from like previous, and they ran into each other at a local show in Texas, and ugly man Joe was cornering one of his teammates, and Kevin Holland was there with his crew, and maybe I believe maybe his teammate was fighting as well, and these guys they did a pretty good job of kind of like keeping them away from each other. But then at the end of the show, from watching the video of what ugly man Joe put up, he said that he was walking up the stairs and then he ran into Kevin Holland in the stairway, and then the altercation happened. Then Kevin Holland put out a video, or he responded to that and said like nothing happened, right? Like what happened was like he was going down the stairs, ugly man Joe was going up the stairs, both of them were on one side of the stairway, and then nobody wanted to move out the way, right? So like we got like a he said she said type of thing, because ugly man Joe also said that he was jumped by Kevin Holland and his crew, right? After this whole thing happened. In the video he explained that as well. To me, it's like one side of me thinks like, where does this beef even come from? Like, I don't know where it even comes from, right? And then another thing is, can we be grown-ups sometimes? You know what I mean? Like, can we be?
Yeah, this is stupid. Like this is real stupid. You really, if you are above the age of like 22, knock it off. Like I get if you're like a young man. Like I went through my young man days. I've had a couple bar altercations here and there when I was a younger man. And yeah, that's a part of just being a knucklehead when you're of a certain age, but grow up. You guys have careers, you've got families, you've got loved ones that rely on you, and you're supporting people and stuff. This is just stupid. This is all really, really, really just stupid. If I'm not mistaken, Ugly Man Joe is still a UFC fighter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is a place where you can settle this, right? There's a place you guys fight in the same weight range. You guys can actually settle this in a real fight, and you can get paid for it, right? And you can advance your career for it, and you can not face any sort of legal repercussions for it, and dumb injuries like you break your hand punching a guy because he didn't move on the stairwell. This is stupid.
What do you think, Logan?
Yeah, it's a weird one. What is Joseph Holmes? Is he the same weight class as Kevin Holland?
Middleweight.
Yeah, middleweight. Yeah. So Holland's gone down to welterweight now, but yeah, so they could fight, but obviously it don't make sense rankings wise. But It's a weird one because we had the same with Colby and Jorge last year. Like you got Masvidal, who's however old he is, in his 30s with kids, and he's sucker punching a guy he fought 3 weeks prior and had 25 minutes to knock him out, but decides he wants to punch him in the street instead, and now he's not fought in however long because he's got court cases and fines to pay and money to pay to back to Colby. So it's just stupid, really, and yeah, not much else to say.
It's it's turning into like street beef, and like a lot of people say that a lot of fighters, you hear this after they fight, right? They're like, "Oh, I said that because I was hyping the fight," right?
Yeah,
And after the fight, they're like, "Oh, I was hyping the fight, nothing personal." Like, to me, I don't like that. Like, I don't like that you said something on somebody because you were trying to hype the fight. Like, either hype the fight or don't hype the fight. Like, be truthful of like what you want to say, and if you're attacking somebody, attack them truthfully. Like, I think that's what I want to hear. And I think in this situation, you know, they have clear beef against each other, and if they run into each other and if it gets physical, I think it gets physical. You know what I mean? But yes, you want to kind of stay away from fighting somebody in the street because there's like lawsuits. Like Colby Covington is a guy that will throw the lawsuit on you, right? And that's what Jorge's going through right now, right? Like, you could be like this, street dude or whatnot, but man, there's guys out there that's gonna yell in your face. They're gonna antagonize you. They're gonna do what they can to get you to attack them. And then once you attack them, they'll take a chipped tooth. They'll take a broken nose. They take a blood. They'll do what they need to do because they want that monetary reward, right? And I think you should try to avoid that as a fighter as much as you can, because in this situation, Holland actually told Holmes like, "Hey, you could come to my gym and we could fight." It's like, why? Why would Holland want to go there and fight in the gym, right? Because, like you said, Ant, there's a platform for you to fight. Get a contract signed. You
Get
don't think the
paid.
UFC? Yeah, you don't think the UFC wouldn't make that fight? Like if you wanted
They're
that
making
fight?
all sorts of stupid fights right now.
Exactly.
Like to just be one of them. Like this, it
Yeah.
just this is asinine. Like you are grown men. You are adults. Act like it, please.
Oh, here's the beef. It's because Holmes dated Holland's uncle's ex-girlfriend.
That's serious. Oh, that's even dumber than I thought.
yeah,
That's so stupid.
literally.
Yeah, that's dumb. Like
Now I remember.
Yeah.
It is stemming from that for some reason. Yeah, it is. It does stem from some kind of like a woman is involved. Now,
I mean that's typically what it is. It's
Yeah.
a woman
Classic.
in a lot of these. Like, grow up, fellas. There's tons of women out in the world, and just have a little game and get yourself a fresh haircut. You can land one of them.
Yeah, and just move on. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of fish in the sea. It's like when I look at this and these type of situations, they can go from 0 to 100 in like 5 seconds, right? And then you got people people that come with you. You got people that are part of your crew. There you got people that are your friends, and you don't know how they'll react to this situation, right? Like if you come face to face with somebody and it looks like there's some tension, there's some beef, you don't know how that's gonna escalate into. You know what I mean? Like I want to like talk about, and I think this was in Houston, right? And who died in Houston? Who got murdered in Houston?
Take
Like
off from
exactly.
from Migos.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying that these guys are the level of like him, he's a super celebrity, right? But like that's what it can become in an instant, right? And we don't want to see people die.
I think you're spot on with that, because like the same way you want to be careful about a rapper's entourage, that's like a thing that people worry about. Well, fighters roll around with people too. I'm without naming this particular fighter. There's one fighter that's active on the UFC roster, and I didn't have a bad encounter with him at all. But I just saw the guys he was rolling with that day, and these were some goons. Okay, these were straight up goons. All right, And I don't know. I know the politics or what who was affiliated with this and that, but I know a goon when I see one. Fighters roll around with people like that all the time. Like we were just talking, we referred to the Conor and Khabib beef. Like they were rolling around with goons, and goons started a lot of stuff, and they get into it with each other. Like just don't do it. Just don't. Like those things escalate so quickly. There are many people sitting in jail right now thinking about, well, if I just controlled myself for that 0.3 seconds, maybe I wouldn't be spending my next 40 years here.
Yeah.
Just be smart, fellas.
All the time. It happens all the time. All the time it happens. And like you said, like, and it's not just like in the US. There's goons all around the world. There's fighters all around the world, and you don't even know where they come from. Like you don't know who their childhood friends are that roll with them all the time. Those dudes they could be street dudes that you don't even have no idea. You know what I mean? Nowadays, street dudes don't even look like street dudes. Like there's certain guys you could tell right away, but there's certain guys where they look like the preppy like businessman, but they're a good. Like
blow
you
your
can't
head
tell.
off. Like
exactly.
it's just not smart. It's really just not smart at all. Just don't invite those sort of issues for yourself. Just don't.
And we've seen like brawls break out in like hotel lobbies. You know, let me give you an example of like Khabib and his whole crew.
Yeah.
You don't think Khabib has goons in his crew just because they're fighters?
I've heard stories of like Masvidal I know someone close to me is witness Masvidal in like a street fight in like a hotel bar or something, just knocking people out. Like it's just stupid. It's just real stupid. Just knock it off, fellas. Just knock it off. That's it.
There's so many fights that have gone on in the street that involve like notable fighters just clocking dudes, like beating up two dudes at one time that you just don't hear about, right? Well, you hear about it behind the scenes, but you don't hear about it like out in the media. You don't hear about it, you know what I mean? So yeah, man, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, man, thank you guys, man, for joining us. Make sure you guys go in the descriptions, download the AllStar app. We'll have Ant back on in the future, Logan as well. Make sure you guys go follow them on social media. And yeah, man, we're gonna shut this down, and we'll be back next week with another recap.